Hello, welcome to my video session. I will now talk about how to analyze sentiment using Vader. During this session I will first talk about sentiment analysis in general. Then I will talk about Vader sentiment tool, and then about advantages of Vader, why to use it. But then I will talk about challenges, briefly about data pipeline. I'm not going to talk about text cleaning or pre-processing because I'm now focusing on sentiment analysis, but I'm going to briefly talk about the data pipeline, which is very important. And then I will give you a hands-on experience how to use Vader sentiment tool. I will give you examples how to prepare the sentiment tool and how to calculate the score, and then I will talk about the scoring, and then at the end of this video session I will talk about the case. I will use the same Twitter dataset what we are using during this course, and then I will use this Vader sentiment tool in this case and provide you illustrations about the graphs and some charts relating to sentiment intensity. So to begin with, what is a sentiment analysis? Well, it is used to analyze the emotion of text. To put it briefly, it is the process of detecting a positive or negative emotion of a text. Using sentiment analysis, we can detect whether the given sentence, paragraph, or a document contains a positive or a negative emotion, opinion in it. Sentiment analysis is a tool for the companies to know their customers in depth, but I think also public sector organizations can use also sentiment analysis to know more about their customers and customer experience in general. But sentiment analysis is used to know what kind of emotion sentiment do customers have for them, and as a result of that, companies can improve their customer experience, their products, services based on the analysis of customer sentiments. So that is briefly about sentiment analysis. Then Vader sentiment tool. Vader sentiment tool is a sentiment analysis tool. It stands for Valence Aware Dictionary and Sentiment Reasoner. You can find more information from this address. But briefly, it's a lexicon and rule-based tool for sentiment analysis. Vader sentiment tool is specialized in measuring sentiment in social media. It is used for analyzing the sentiment of text which contains both positive and negative polarity. The objective is to quantify how much of a positive or negative emotion is present in the text. It can also measure the intensity of emotion. Above all, Vader sentiment tool is open sourced. It doesn't cost anything, so you can just install Vader sentiment tool library on the web. So it's very easy to install and easy to use. What about the advantages of Vader? Some of the sentiment analysis tools they they require, training and testing before you start to use it. But Vader, it doesn't require training and testing data set. You don't have to train the data or test it data set. So it's very easy to install and easy to use. So you don't have to customize the sentiment analysis tool to use it. It understands easily the sentiment of a text. I have even used Finnish text to well, but mainly I have used English text, but it understands easily the sentiment of a text. It's specialized in measuring sentiment in social media. It listens to what people are saying about them and their products and services in social media. Whether people's opinion is positive or negative, and if the sentiment polarity is changing over time. I will briefly provide you an example how the sentiment polarity is changing over time. So it's very interesting to know how the sentiment is evolving during the time. It's easy to use, and sentiment analysis of social media data. Well, in general, sentiment analysis of social media data is by far the most popular application of natural language processing on social data. So that's why I was also interested in exploring the sentiment analysis tool, because it's the most popular application of NLP. What about the challenges in general? If you talk about for example, social media data, what are the challenges when you are evaluating the sentiment? So people are usually, sometimes sarcastic. They say things that they don't really mean, but they are sarcastic. So that's one challenge to tackle. And some people might have both positive and negative opinions in their social media tweets, for example. So they use both opinions. So how to analyze that? So yeah. And then NLP data pipeline. Just briefly about that data NLP, natural language processing data pipeline. Well, first, step one is to get the data. Then you have to clean the data, for sentiment analysis. You have to pre-process it, tokenize it, remove stop words, because in language there are some words which are very usual, but they don't really mean anything. For example, I am, you, he or she, or something like that. So these are words that they don't really mean anything, but you have to remove those stop words. And some cases you have to lemmatize the text, so you have to change the wording in the tweets. For example, running, you have to change that into form run, or coming, you have to change that in a form of come. So that's lemmatizing. And then you have to do feature engineering work. You have to start modeling, evaluate the results, and at the end of the pipeline you have to deploy it, and then monitor the results and update it. So to begin with, how to install Vader? Well, step is that you have to install Vader by using the following command. You have to install the package. I personally use Anaconda environment, so you have to install the package using this command. So then it's being installed. And then when you have installed the package, you have to import libraries. When you are working with your Jupyter notebook, you have to import libraries, and this is the command how you bring the libraries and Vader, and using these commands. If you are using this sentiment intensity analyzer, and then when you have imported libraries, you have to prepare the sentiment tool and start calculating the score. Here is an example how to calculate the score. So first, Python is an object based language, so you have to first create an intensity analyzer object. So that's the object, and then you have to give the data for the object. So here is the object, and then you have to give the data, text, and then it calculates the sentiment text. So now it gives sentiment "I love football." It's a sentence, so it's a very positive. So 80% positive. Compound is 63%. So very high. And then another example, but here is a sentence that there are exclamation marks at the end of the sentence and capital letters. So now it's more positive than the previous example, and compound score is higher. And then another example, I love football, and there is a smiley, and it's more positive than the previous example, and the compound score is higher. So these are the examples how certain things in a sentence increases the compound score and polarity. And then an example about negative sentence, I hate football. So it's very negative, 78% negative, and compound score is below 0. And then an example about a neutral sentence, Alex is a footballer, and then it's very neutral, so it doesn't really give any information otherwise that Alex is a footballer. It's neither negative or positive. And then there's an example about the Porter case example that it's some sentences might have both negative and positive things. So this is an example about that. So I love the football game, but hated Lionel Messi. I guess it was a good game. So it's both positive, negative. So it's very neutral, and compound score is below 0. So those are the examples. It's an object-based language. So first you have to create the object, and then you start to give the data for the object, and it starts to calculate the score. It's very simple. Maybe the most simple sentiment tool nowadays. So it's very easy to learn. About scoring briefly, as said, sentiment intensity analyzer is an object, and polarity scores is a method which gives us scores of the following categories: positive, negative, neutral. The more compound score is closer to +1, the higher the positive to the text. The compound score is computed by summing the valence scores of each word in the lexicon, adjusted according to the rules, and then normalized to be between -1. It's the most extreme negative and +1, most extreme positive. So this is the most useful metric if you want a single dimensional measure of sentiment for a given sentence. Calling it a normalized, weighted composite score is accurate. And the same metric is also useful for researchers who would like to set standardized thresholds for classifying sentences as either positive, neutral, or negative. So it's useful for researchers. So typical threshold values are positive sentiment, its compound score is more than 0.05. Neutral is between these values, neutral, and negative is below 0.05 minus. So that's information about the scoring. Next, I will provide you a case. We are using the same case what we are using in this course, this airport service quality Twitter data set. I'm not going to spend time now how I did the cleaning, but I have already cleaned the data set, cleaned the tweet data, and now I'm going to show how to measure the sentiment from this data. The data consists of 313,376 rows, 13 columns. Well, first, when I started to work with this Jupyter Notebook file, I'm importing libraries for to use this libraries to use this code. First, I have to import libraries, which are mentioned here. Simple commands. So NLTK and Vader sentiment intensity analyzer libraries, and then I brought the data in, and the data is over here. So 13 columns, and this is the 10 first rows of the data. As you can see, checking data. I'm checking now here the data, and I'm checking also null values, because there's something it could raise problems when you are using this sentiment analysis tool if there are null values. So I'm going to check that there are no null values, and then I start to calculate score. This Vader score, I add a new column. It's called Vader score, and it calculates the score using the data in this tweet text column, and it calculates the score, and it uses the analyzer object, which is mentioned here. Here is the object. Yeah. And then when it has done that, I'm checking data, and Vader score column, it's at the end of the columns. Here's the Vader score. It has now calculated the Vader score from this data, and this is the 15 first rows in this data, in this new data set. I'm checking positive and negative values, and positive negative numbers. How many positive numbers and negative? So here are the figures. So 120,000 positive, more than 120,000, and 158,000 are the negative ones. Then I'm adding a new column. It's called Vader sentiment label value. It's to make the data set clearer. So if it's 0, it's negative, and it's a 1, it's a positive. So I'm adding a new column there. I'm checking that if it's added, and then I'm calculating positive, neutral, negative, making these functions, and checking what was the number of positive, neutral, and negative numbers. So it's over here, 120,000 positive, 112,000 neutral, and 45,000 negative tweets. So this is the how to calculate the Vader, Vader score or the sentiment score. So it's very simple code. So now it's time to start to illustrate the sentiment. You can do, I'm just showing you a couple of examples how to illustrate the sentiment. But if you are working in a customer experience profession, I think it's very interesting to know what is the behind these negative sentiments. What are the reasons why people are complaining in tweets about their customer experience at the airport? So that's a very interesting thing to know. So there are ways to know that, but I'm just providing you a couple of examples how to illustrate the sentiment. One of the most simple way to illustrate the sentiment is word clouds. So the greater the font, the more it has been mentioned in those tweets. So it's very simple way to illustrate. So I'm now here using no tokens column. So I have tokenized the tweet text column. So it's just using those tokens. So these are all words, all the data is here. So these are the words which have been mentioned the most, they are the most often mentioned words in this no tokens column, or in this tweet sentence data. So you can make here conclusions. What's the bigger the font, so people are communicating, people are saying things about staff terminal. They have been thanking about their flight. Well, very positive positive messages, but there are also things here which could be problematic for could be interesting for the customer experience professionals to know what is the reason behind those words. And here is the word cloud about this positive sentiment. When they have sent Twitter messages, they have been used these words in their positive messages most often. And then the last one is the negative word cloud, and here you can see that it's very interesting to know that that people have been communicating about security gates, bus packages, luggages, bags. They have been stuck in traffic, car parking, passport control staff. They have been saying these things in their negative Twitter messages. Yes. Well, that was an example about word cloud. Next, I will provide you an example about the sentiment intensity. So here you can make observations how the sentiment has developed during the selected period of time, and you can make decisions what to do next in your analysis. For instance, to explore what is the reason behind the negative sentiment. So now, how the sentiment analysis, how the sentiment intensity has developed during the selected period of time. So I will give you an example about that. So I'm now setting up the data ready for that. So I'm just converting the data column to pandas datetime and setting up the data ready for sentiment intensity. I'm now focusing on 5 airports: London Heathrow, Manchester, Dublin, London Gatwick, and Stansted. I'm making constraint 100 days. So I'm going to explore how the sentiment intensity has developed over the past 100 days. So now I'm here plotting a bar chart to visualize the sentiment at London Heathrow Airport. So this is the sentiment intensity. So it's mainly positive, but as you can see, January it has been negative. So it's interesting to know what is the reason behind this. And then I'm going to plotting a bar chart to visualize the development at Manchester Airport. So it's in general it's very positive, but there have been some negative days also. And here is an example at Dublin Airport. This is interesting to know that it's the same day as it was in it was not the same day, but otherwise you can here make conclusions that there are some days which have been that it has been negative sentiment. And here is an example from London Gatwick. It's quite, it's at the beginning of this data quite positive, but at the end it has been quite negative. So what's the reason behind this? So it's interesting to know for further analysis. And here is the bar chart for Stansted. Same thing, how the sentiment intensity has developed during the past 100 days. And here is an example about sentiment intensity at all 5 airports. So if you add all the data that I have just shown in one graph, so it looks like this. So here you can make also some conclusions. What airports might have some problems in their customer service or customer experience. So Stansted, it looks like they have had quite negative sentiment, and also London Gatwick and Manchester during the last days of this data set. So, but in general, London Heathrow has been quite, the sentiment intensity has been quite positive. but Stansted, Manchester, and London Gatwick, they have had unsatisfied customers, so they have been quite critical to those airports. If you start to explore this chart. So this was a brief session. I have now talked about sentiment analysis in general. I have talked about Vader sentiment tool, about advantages of Vader, challenges in general. I have provided you information about the data pipeline briefly. I have given you information about how to install Vader, how to import libraries, how to prepare the sentiment tool, and how to calculate the score, and given you information about the scoring, and provided you a hands-on experience in this case. So thank you very much for listening. It was a great experience to provide you this video session. You will find this notebook file in my GitHub account. Thank you very much. Bye bye.